Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 3rd of December of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting details, a lot of interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about one interesting report, interesting numbers that we got from the Ukrainian sources. Some Ukrainian sources or pro-Ukrainian sources reported that during the previous months, during November, the Russians used more than 1,200 guided bombs. We are talking about FAB 250, FAB 500, and FAB 1500, and maybe different types of RBK 500, for example, as well. And the source reported that there was a day when the Russians made a record of 120 these guided bombs in a single day. Just imagine yourself, there was a day in November when the Russians used 120 guided bombs just for 24 hours. And then the source asked himself a very interesting question. I wonder if the United States supplied Ukraine with 120 original JDAMs in total. So we see the numbers, we see the difference, and all these numbers are telling us that Ukrainians don't have chances to do anything with Russia. Furthermore, today we got more details, more like events, more updates, and we got some interesting updates regarding the military aid. As you can see, there is a graphic and there is like numbers, and as you can see that December, November, October has the lowest level of support from Western countries. To tell the truth, I'm not sure what the Ukrainians are planning to do. Obviously, the Ukrainians are not going to survive and to continue the same way until the end of president elections in the United States of America, but who knows. So now let's continue with Kherson direction. We have a lot of very interesting updates and details. According to the information we have, according to the Ministry of Defense, as a result of clashes on this direction, the Ukrainians lost 65 soldiers, 2 armored vehicles and 3 artillery systems. And once again, we are talking about the village in the area, in the vicinity of the village by the name of Avdiivka. Another Lancet strike, another artillery system destroyed. Maybe you're tired about this Avdiivka because almost every single day we increase the numbers of dates for the previous months and blah blah blah, and we see lots of like explosions, but this is the reality. This is the reality for the Ukrainians, and this is the trap that new general of Russian forces in Brink have created. He tried to keep the Ukrainians' foothold on the Ukrainian side, on the Russian side of the Brink, of Dnieper River. He tried to save some number of Ukrainians, trying to force the Ukrainians to send more and more forces, and while they're sending forces, the Russians are killing them and destroying them with all types of weapons they have. Furthermore, we got probably the first geolocation for the very long period of time from Kherson. The Russians managed to discover some ammo depot, and as a result of artillery probably strike, that ammo depot was destroyed. So this is about Kherson, let's say central part of Dnieper River, or Dnieper front line, and Brink, the northern. But we also got another interesting update from the islands. Now, this video was published today by the Ukrainian forces. On this video, we see how the Ukrainians were trying to make something like reconnaissance operation or something like this. So the Ukrainians landed at some certain island and they were moving from one building to another, trying to understand whether the Russians in here in this village or not. So what does it mean? First of all, according to this video, the Ukrainians, as you can see, without any barrier, without any resistance, managed to enter the island. As you can see, lots of abandoned military equipment by the Russian forces, as I understand, and there are no Russians in this area. So a lot of questions, to tell the truth, because according to geolocations, according to map, this territory used to be under Russian control. So that video was geolocated, and basically the Ukrainians landed in this area. And once again, the Ukrainians haven't faced any, let's say, resistance from the Russians. So as I understand, as a result at least of that operation, the Ukrainians managed to increase and improve their positions on this bank of, on this side of the Russian island. If you remember, probably in November, the Ukrainians already published the video. Yes, the Ukrainians have already published the video from the northern part of the same island. And we have, as you can see, confirmations from Syriac map. So we have some video. Yes, on the 9th of November, we got update that the Russians were attacking the Ukrainian positions in this part of the islands with FPV drones. So as I understand, the Ukrainians continue improvements of this territory, and for now, I'm not sure for 100% where exactly are the Russian positions in this area and where the Ukrainians. But according to these two geolocations, there are very high chances that this part of the islands this part of the islands is under complete Ukrainian control. So we will update this map, obviously, because we have two geolocations. We got a lot of evidence that Ukrainians have control, and this very interesting video, we need situation we need to analyze to understand what are the next Ukrainian plans in this direction. Now we are moving to Zaporizhzhia area. We have some updates from this territory as well. We have some Russian counterattacks. The Russians during the previous day were trying to attack and destroy the Ukrainian armored vehicles, Leopards, Bradleys. On this video we see another Bradley was damaged and destroyed twice. First, the Bradley was damaged by the Russian anti-tank missile, and then FPV drone made a double strike. So very interesting video. And we have the video of Russian counter-offensive operation, and according to information we have, that that offensive operation was repelled by the Ukrainian 23rd Mechanized Brigade. According to information we have, 23rd Mechanized Brigade is located in Novoprokopivka. So as I understand, the situation fit the correspond reality, and that attack was repelled, and the Russians, as we understand, were trying to force the Ukrainians to step back from the foothold that Ukrainians have between Rabotina and Verbova. We know that Ukrainians during the previous days managed to concentrate some forces in this area. We have a lot of geolocations of Russian FPV drone strikes, so maybe the Russians were just trying to let's say, to break the Ukrainian plans of further offensive operation to the south. When talking about the Ministry of Defense, they reported that the Ukrainians lost 20 soldiers and 2 armored vehicles. So as you can see, the level of losses from the Ukrainian side is the lowest probably since the creation of this foothold. Now we are moving further to Avdiivka tactical bridgehead because we continue receiving a lot of updates. The Russians managed to discover and destroy another artillery system in the vicinity of Novopol, the artillery system that Ukrainians were using to support and to protect or to support their forces on the north of Pryutina. The thing is that today the Russians also published very interesting video, a geolocated one. Just let's finish with Lancet strike. Artillery system was destroyed, and we have an interesting video from the Russian side. As you can see, I have updated the map, and now this area below this small water reservoir is under complete Russian control. The Russians published the video how they were storming this area. The Russian stormtroopers were fighting with the Ukrainians. The battle for this tree line started probably 2 months ago, and just on the 3rd of December, the Russians managed to break the situation and to establish complete control over this territory. So this is the video, the entire video of how the Russian drone was flying above this territory, how the Russians were storming this area, attacking this area. So that's why, based on this geolocation, I have updated the map. We still haven't received any geolocated confirmation whether the Russians managed to establish control over this, for example, territory or not. We haven't received anything, so that's why we'll keep this territory in the gray zone, because I believe that maybe this is no one land, let's call it like this. But I'll remind you that during the previous weeks we got a lot of updates of the Russian attempts to attack in direction of Staromayorska. So basically that operation, that geolocation we just saw, completely correspond to the reality, and the Russians are trying first of all to secure their flanks, to secure the let's say the western flank, this one, to prevent any attacks from this side. And if the Russians are able to do this, they can have securely and safely continue their offensive operation further, first of all in direction of the hill that located on the east of the main Russian foothold in this area, and after that the Russians can continue their offensive operation further in direction of Staromayorska. And obviously this operation, there are very high chances that these attacks that we are talking are maybe will take place even this year, before the end of this year. Furthermore, during the previous day the Russians were bombing Urozhaine. I don't remember when we received any updates about any bombardments of this city the last time, but as we can see, the Russians renewed the bombardments, and this is probably the another evidence that the Russians do have some plans in this area, and maybe they want to implement something even before the end of this year. Now, according to the information we have, according to the Russians, as a result of clashes on South Donetsk direction, the Ukrainians lost 85 soldiers and 3 armored vehicles. Now we're moving to Avdiivka area, and we have also lots of updates. Most of them are coming from the north, some of them are coming from the south. We have very interesting update from the south, but before, let's finish with the northern direction. The Russians published the video how they managed to attack, how they managed to discover and to attack the Ukrainian Bradley in Stepova. This is a fresh video, as I understand. I don't remember this geolocation before. So this video give us a few important updates. First of all, this video tells us that there are still no full control over Berdichi and over Stepovo, Petrovska from the Russian side. For now, the Russians still control just the eastern part of the village, and we still haven't received any geolocations, any confirmations that the Russians managed to establish control over the western or even the central part of the village. So basically, this territory is still in the gray zone. Furthermore, we got another Bradley destroyed along the railways in direction of Ocheretina. So we can say that 2 Bradleys were damaged or destroyed during the previous 24 hours on Donetsk direction. Furthermore, the Russians published the footage of evacuation of damaged Bradley. So this is, according to Rybar, for example, this is the first real evidence that the Russians managed to evacuate more or less normal Bradley from the combat line, because during the previous battles the Russians destroyed significant number of this type of vehicles, but most of them were or destroyed till zero, till ruins, or were evacuated by the Ukrainian engineering forces. And now this is probably the first case of a successful evacuation from the Russian side. We haven't received any updates regarding the progress of the Russians and so on. So, as I understand, today there were very heavy clashes, but neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians managed to achieve some success or some results on the ground. Avdiivka is under very heavy fire. Today, Ukrainian sources, Ukrainian soldiers published some videos from some footages from the city itself. You see lots of funerals, lots of destroyed buildings. There are no population. According to the information we have, there are still around 1,300 people, civilians live here. Probably it's old people who can't evacuate, who doesn't have relatives in Ukraine, and they don't have any place to live or something like this. So as you can see, Avdiivka repeats the story of Bakhmut. And as you can see, there are still no clashes in the central, so in the main fortification area. Interesting updates are coming from the south. We see that the Russians increased their activity on the southern direction. We got more and more geolocations of Russian bombardments of this territory. So basically, the Russians are preparing themselves before the further offensive operation. But as I understand, this situation is going to take time, because the Russians during the previous months, years, were fighting. The main clashes took place just along the combat line in the industrial area, along the railways. So that's why the Russians didn't attack the residential area on the south. And now they need to start everything from the beginning. So there are still a lot of job to do. So I wouldn't expect that the Russians would try to attack very soon. But if they do, I'm not saying that they're not going to do this. They can do, but probably the loss will be heavy. Very interesting video we received from Avdiivka industrial area. On this video we can see new Russian type of weapon or type of equipment, the evacuation drone or support drone. This drone, it's not something like I don't know, it's not a Tesla, obviously. It's something very simple, but anyway, as you can see, this type of equipment helps the Russians much. On this video we can see how the Russians were bringing water, food, supply, ammo to the Russian soldiers on the edge positions. As you can see, 2 Russian soldiers went out the trenches and took everything they could. Then this evacuation or support machine start moving back. The Ukrainians tried to shut down with drone, but they missed. And this is another interesting thing. This is the most important probably scene, important footage from this video of the usage. This is the drone, and take a look at the right part of this engineering equipment, and you're gonna see the Russian electronic warfare, new Russian electronic warfare equipment, Volnorez. So this is the reason why this machine is so successful and why the Ukrainians can't do anything with this, because this is very small equipment, and the Russians need just one Volnorez to protect this system. And if we will go back a little bit here, we're gonna see that the Ukrainians managed to discover the machine, and obviously the Ukrainians could attack and destroy, but because of Volnorez, probably the Ukrainians lost the signal and this drone fell down. So this is the situation. Once again, this machine brought some supply to the Russian edge position, and this is like also very important part of the war. Another situation, another attempt to destroy, another miss. And in the final part of the video, we're going to see probably the most important scenes. And on this video, for example, we see how the Russians were evacuating the wounded soldier. Once again, this engineering evacuation machine with electronic warfare equipment Volnorez, and this soldier can be at least 99% sure that nothing is going to happen with him because he's under complete protection. Very important part, and I believe that the next year the Russians will increase the production of this type of equipment, and we're gonna see more and more footages and scenes with the usage of this type of, let's say, evacuation machines. Very interesting video. According to the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, as a result of clashes on Donetsk direction, the Ukrainians lost around 300 soldiers, 3 armored vehicles, and 3 artillery systems. Donetsk direction is not just Avdiivka, also Klishchiivka. From Klishchiivka and Bakhmut, Artyomovsk direction, we see that the Russians continue bombardments of this territory. There are forces of Chechensky battalions, Chechensky forces, and they're bombing and attacking Klishchiivka heavily. During the previous 24 hours, there were no active clashes or attempts to storm the hill at 215.7, but obviously due to these heavy bombardments, the Russians have some plans like this, and maybe within the next 48 hours, we're gonna start to see more updates from this territory. The Russians are using not just artillery forces, they're using all types of weapons. On this video, we see how the Russian drone managed to record and make the footage of work of Su-25 above Artyomovsk city. Su-25 attacked the Ukrainian positions, and then they were turning back safely home. So the Russians are pushing the Ukrainians heavily. We have received some geolocations, some footages from the area between Bogdanovka, Khromova, Yagidne, Berkhovka. According to some mappers, I have updated the map. Now, according to military summary map, these 3 lines are under Russian control. And according to information we have, there are 2 brigades that currently storm this area. So there are, as we discussed, there are 2 important fortifications, Bogdanovka itself and another important area along the railways by the name of Pitomnik, and these 2 territories are under attack of 200 Russian motorized brigade and 217th regiment. All these forces are located in this area. This is 200th Arctic Motor Rifle Brigade, and this brigade attacks the Ukrainian positions in this Pitomnik, and 217th Air Assault Regiment attacks Bogdanovka itself. So I believe also we're going to receive some updates. If you have access to map, you can take a look at the video in Khromova Chasov Yar. On the road, the Russians published the video of their FPV drone operator works, significant losses from the Ukrainian side, and very cruel one. So if you have access to the map, you can take a look at this video also. And now we are moving to Lyman direction. We have a lot of updates from this territory, a lot of ficus, as you can see. This is something new for this region. According to information we have, as a result of clashes on this direction, the Ukrainians lost 250 soldiers and 2 armored vehicles. As you can see, the level of losses is very heavy, almost the same level of losses as on the Donetsk direction. On this video, we can see how the Russians were demining the area. I'm not sure that this video is fresh because of the weather, but who knows. Also, the Russians continue bombardments of Bilogorovka. The forces of 81st Air Assault Brigade in the Air Mobile Brigade in this area, using the RBK 500 aviation cluster rounds. The Ukrainians have significant losses as a result of this usage of this weapon, and we have a lot of very interesting updates from Tarskoye salient. If you remember the previous video, we discussed the Ukrainian attempt to attack the Russian positions in Dibrova, north to Dibrova. The Ukrainians used that attack was made by the 63rd Mechanized Brigade of Ukrainian forces. The Ukrainians involved 3 tanks in that operation. They managed to land the infantry, and maybe they managed to capture some territories, who knows. And it was a very big secret for us. But today, right before I start making the video, the Russian sources published some details about that operation, and the Russians are saying that that attack was repelled, that Ukrainians lost around 100 soldiers and 8 Ukrainian soldiers were captured. Of course, the Ukrainians at least published some geolocations videos to see the attack, but the Russians haven't published nothing about this, anything, so it's very difficult to understand whether it's true or not. But anyway, the Russians published some information. This is the most important. The Ukrainians activated their FPV drone strikes above the territory, FPV drone control above the territory between Kremenna and Tarskoye Island. For example, in this video, we see the Ukraine's FPV drone attacking the Russian truck that's stuck in the ground, and that probably vehicle was damaged and destroyed. A little bit to the north, the Ukrainians published more videos of FPV drone strikes against the Russian armored vehicles. So as you can see, currently there are very heavy clashes from both sides. It's not just the Russians who attacks, either the Russians and the Ukrainians attack each other. The Russians try to move in direction Kremenna Zherebets River. The Ukrainians try to counter-attack in the flanks in the vicinity of Dibrova. So there are very heavy clashes, and the level of losses tell us about this update as well. Also, most of the mappers, including Western Sources map, including the Deep State map, have updated their maps showing that this territory was captured by the Russians as a result of offensive operations that are taking place right now. For now, I'm not planning to update the map because we need to have more geolocations, because according to those mappers, this territory is under Russian control. But today we got video from the Russian side how the Russian FPV drone, how the Russians were discovered the Ukrainian machine gun position, and as a result of FPV drone strike, that machine gun position was suppressed or destroyed. So from one perspective, from the mappers, Western mappers and different mappers, we see that this territory is under Russian control, but today we got geolocation that show us completely opposite information. So for now, we will keep the map as is because we need more details, more information. The only thing that we can do is to, let's say, to make this area in the gray zone, because we have some certain updates from the Western sources, from pro-Ukrainian. Obviously, they made their conclusions based on something, so maybe we will adjust this territory and show the gray zone. But anyway, the level of loss is very heavy, and the Russians are pushing in direction of Zherebets River as well. When talking about Kupiansk, according to the Russians, they launched, let's say, the 30s attempts to storm Sinkovka. The level of losses of the Ukrainians: 95 soldiers, 3 armored vehicles, 1 artillery system per day. So we haven't received almost nothing almost anything from this area. No geolocations. One geolocation we have already discussed, the diary of Uday, another Russian famous FPV drone operator. It's 17th day of his work in Kupiansk direction, and he has already reduced the Ukrainian army for more than 120 soldiers. So the level of losses are very heavy just as a result of work of one FPV drone operator. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.